Hi, and welcome to a special production of the Brookdale Network. My name is Meg Natter, and I'm co-coordinator of the Women's and Gender Studies program here at Brookdale Community College. And I said we have a special program for you today, and we sure do, because we have a very special guest, journalist, editor, publisher, feminist and political activist Gloria Steinem is here with us today to talk about her past, her present, and future endeavors to promote equality here in America and around the world. I thought we'd make this an intergenerational kind of discussion today, so I've invited Brookdale Professor Emeritus Irma Lester, who was one of the first women's studies professors at Brookdale and actually helped establish the program in 1999. Also with us is Suzanne Luhrs, a student majoring in both psychology and women's and gender studies. So thank you everyone for being here today. Especially Gloria, thank you so much for joining us at Brookdale Community College. I'm just going to dive right in. As I said, I do teach women's and gender studies, and one of the questions that comes up often is, what is feminism, and is it still alive today? And in my classes, a lot of students say, oh, it's just about women hating men and women trying to get beyond challenges of the past. But I teach them that it's the political, economic, and social equality of women. And I'm wondering if that is still true today. Is that still the definition of feminism, or has it been broadened at all?
Certainly that's the dictionary definition, and I think it's very important that people just go to the dictionary and see that it's not feminazi like Rush Limbaugh says. Because, you know, that is the primary problem, that the word has been demonized in the same way that, say, liberal and other words have been, so people don't know what it means. But of course there is opposition on the part of people who do know what it means, you know, who are against equality, who do see the natural human form as a hierarchy, not a circle, you know, in which we're all connected. So, and has it broadened? Yeah, it's broadened as we realize its impact. You know, I think, you know, in the family, say, we understood in the beginning that it made more sense if girls had the same educational opportunities as boys in the family, and gradually we realized that a democratic family is the fundament of democracy in the rest of society, you know. So, you know, we've realized how important it is.
And a lot of my students ask, is there another word you can use besides feminism? It seems so negative still. And do you have other terms?
Listen, I always felt whatever you change it to, they'll make that negative. So
no, I think you're right. There are other great words. There's womanist, there's mujerista, there's women's liberationist. It is not a negative word, and incidentally, more women self-identify, even without a dictionary definition, as feminists than as Republicans. And
that's good to hear.
About as many or even more than Democrats, you know. So
how about that?
Yeah, so it's an effort to keep us from using the word and sending out a signal to each other, you know, so that we act together.
Right. I was just wondering from Suze, do women your age respond positively or negatively, women you know, to the word?
It's varied. My friends are generally receptive to it, but that's because I've drilled it into them. Other people are like, really? Like, that's weird kind of thing. So it depends upon the demographic you're talking about.
Yes, and we have quite a learning curve here, I think. I was talking to some parents the other day because the flyer came home. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and one of her worksheets around Abraham Lincoln's birthday was about writing about equality. And you could write about Abraham Lincoln, but then they had a list of people, other famous folks who were involved in equality, and guess whose name was on there? Gloria Steinem.
Oh, what an honor. I thought you were going to say Susan B.
She was on there too, but Gloria Steinem. Good, I thought, wow, 4th grade, it's a public school, Wanamassa School right here in Monmouth County. But I was thrilled to see your name. But then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but I get to my classes, and unfortunately, a lot of students don't know your name and don't know about women's rights beyond the suffragette movement, you know, equal voting.
No, I mean, we're not learning human history. We're learning only a very small portion of history. But when you come right down to it, it's more important to me. I mean, mothers say to me, you know, my daughter doesn't know who you are, and I say, but what's important is that your daughter knows who she is. You know, that's the important thing.
That's right.
And Suze will have all kinds of other folks in your generation and beyond, you know, who stand for the same, you know, that's okay. But it's very helpful to know our history. Otherwise, we don't understand that we can continue it. We think we were given the vote, like some magnanimous thing.
Right.
We don't understand how change is made unless we know our history.
Right, and another thing I just want to point out about women's and gender studies. In New Jersey, there's 19 community colleges. Only 9 community colleges actually even have women's and gender studies as an option, as a department, and I think we have a long way to go. Is that something that you work on with higher educational institutions? Is it a goal of yours to keep women's and gender studies in academia, or do you see that as partnering with your efforts to talk about equality around the world and in America? Is it important for higher ed to do that?
No, absolutely. I mean, the presence of women's studies on campus, like the presence of Black studies and gay and lesbian studies and Native Americans, came with a social justice movement. And keeping it there is terribly, terribly important. Keeping books in print, is a revolutionary act in itself. But the ultimate goal is that we study human history. So you don't have to go find a special course to get the female half as well. Well, we're not getting the male half either. There's other problems there. But yes, so at least we're studying human history.
And I think it is important to note that we are all white women here, and I was trying to make a more diverse panel, but we could really only get 4 here. And I was focusing on the different ages, especially because we have such a diverse campus in terms of age. But Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, they all have their own fights that they have fought that you do speak about and write about.
And half of all of those groups are women, so
right.
That would be reason enough to understand that racism and sexism and class, it's all connected, that you can't possibly be a feminist without being an anti-racist, and you can't be a successful anti-racist without
right. And I was trying to fight ageism here today. Another ism.
No, and that is more severe. It's severe for everybody, men too, but more severe for women because we tend to be valued for childbearing and things that are confined to our earlier years. So you only have to look at the movies to understand that ageism is worse for women.
Right, and you were just out at Sundance for the film festival. Would you like to speak at all about your adventures out there? I think you're on a panel.
I'd never been before, but I went to introduce a film called Misrepresentation, which is about the absence of women from decision-making and from being portrayed in the media, and also the crazy ways women are portrayed. It's a really good film, really good, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it. Yeah, documentary, an hour-long documentary. And also another film, which is called War, Women, Art, Revolution, which is about the women's art movement beginning in the late 50s, early 60s, and how it rescued the art world from blank canvases and abstract expressionism and so on. So they're 2 really good documentaries.
Oh, great.
That's good. I wanted to ask Suze, getting back to higher education and women's studies here at Brookdale, when people heard that you were coming to our campus, I'd say about 90% were excited. They got their tickets, were sold out, as you know, and then there were a few folks who had some comments, and I know you're used to all that kind of talk. But Suze mentioned,
I'd love to know.
Yeah, and not just young people. It was a professor.
Yeah, it was a professor, and we were talking about it, and she told me that Gloria Steinem was the reason for the disconnect in America and the breakdown of the nuclear family, and I was like, what?
Here she is, right here. One person.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an overblown idea of my influence, but I'd be happy to take credit.
This is not a negative.
It's not a negative, no. A democratic family is a good thing. Yeah.
But it just seems a shame that even at a higher educational institution, even within our ranks, we're still fighting some of those comments that seem to be from the 70s and 60s. And I expect it from my students, but I don't expect it from faculty. But Irma, maybe you should.
I was going to say, one of the things we did here a number of years ago, we did have something called the New Jersey Project that Paula Rothenberg was very involved with. And we did a diversity across the curriculum. So in addition to having our women's courses and our Native American courses and our African American courses, faculty came to seminars on how to integrate all of this across the curriculum. And it was very successful, but then it was not funded for a long time, and then I retired.
Well, now that's something that people could take up as a result of this program. program
yes.
because that is so important.
That's the thing
to
that
teach
needs
the
to be done.
connections.
Yeah.
You know
Right.
that these are not siloed movements,
Right.
but they're all
together.
one big movement.
And
Yeah.
the people from many different disciplines were very excited. I mean, the nurses did things in their programs. The math people were
Right.
very
Did
devoted.
you write
Yes.
about it? Can
It
people
was
find it
yes,
somewhere?
people can find it. There's a whole.
Tell them how,
Yes.
and then we can agitate for it as a
Okay,
result of this
very
program.
good. It was something I always hoped would be replicated because I felt it worked well. And now there's a whole new group of faculty, including your professor,
Yes.
who might be interested.
Right.
In
Well,
that.
Roseanne Alvarez, we're
I'm sure she could do
co-coordinators
that,
of
yeah.
this program, and we're looking for definitely broadening what we do.
Right.
And even tonight's program is a partnership with 5 different. We have history, political science, anthropology, many groups who have come together to support you being here on campus. So. We're definitely going in that
Yes.
direction, but
We're
I think it
across
needs
the
to be
curriculum. Yeah.
a little bit more organized.
Yeah.
We're going to go to break, and in just a few minutes, we'll be right back with Gloria Steinem.
Whether you are graduating from high school, transitioning to a new career, or seeking to enhance your skills, Brookdale Community College is the gateway to your future. Convenient and affordable, Brookdale offers a variety of degree and certificate programs, as well as personal and professional development courses to help you achieve your goals. Visit us at www.brookdalecc.edu to find out more. That's brookdalecc.edu.
Turn it down. Lowering your thermostat just 1 degree can cool your heating cost by 3%. Answer the call.
This could be good. Hey, you.
Redefine your world. Join the Peace Corps.
Apply now at peacecorps.gov.
Hi, and welcome back to a special production of the Brookdale Network. My name is Meg Natter, and I'm co-coordinator of the Women's and Gender Studies program here at Brookdale. And with us today again, we have Gloria Steinem and also Professor Emeritus Irma Lester and student and major in psychology and women's studies, Suze Luhrs. So we're going to jump right back into our conversation and get to a topic that a lot of my students ask about all the time. Garbage on television. That's that's what they want to talk about. You know, we live here on the Jersey Shore, and there's a television show called Jersey Shore with Snooki and JWoww and all the ladies. And we also have Housewives of New Jersey, and there's also Bridezillas, and just many, many television shows that in one way the women seem to be empowered and showing off their strength. And if the guys can do it, we can do it too. But at the same time, I know a lot of people, at least in my generation, feel a bit uncomfortable with what we're seeing. And Suze, you might want to comment too on what you're. Well, it's hard to represent a whole generation, but young people kind of think it's funny. Gloria, what do you think about what's happening on television in 2011? Because it seems that after all the work you've done and the work of the folks of the 1970s, is that what you worked so hard for? Those kinds of shows and people on television like that?
No, I mean there have been some advances, though. You know, I mean, you couldn't even in the beginning be divorced on television. They had to kill your husband off. You had to be a widow. so it was very hard on men. That stuff. So you know, it isn't as if there haven't been some advances, but mainly what these television shows are about, and nobody here in this state is responsible because I understand only one of the people on Jersey Shore is actually from New Jersey.
Good point.
We're not like
point.
Only one of the Italians is actually Italian.
They summer here. You're right.
Right. But it's much more about cheap production values and product placement fees. So you know you really have to study each one to see how much it actually is being kept going by the number of viewers. At the same time, it is the water we swim in and the air we breathe. And though on Jersey Shore, women are self-willed in a sense, a sexual sense, they're also profoundly imitative. You know, and imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and they seem to think that behaving like guys is or whoever scripts them. I mean, but the important thing is that this is not reality.
Right.
Reality is reality, not these shows.
I keep telling people that when they're like, "Oh, that's what the Jersey Shore is like," and I'm like, "Not all parts of the Jersey Shore are like that." Suze, would you want to comment about television today and culture and what you think about the topic that I brought up?
I think a lot of my friends get the wrong messages from it. About half of my friends think it's ridiculous and you lose brain cells watching it. And then the other half of my friends are like, "Oh my God, Snooki."
Yeah.
Like they flew to Freehold Mall when she was there that one day.
No kidding.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah. And Irma, do you even know these shows that we're talking about?
When I was teaching, before I retired, I was on top of everything. And now, thank goodness, I don't even have to think about shows like that. But I do think also, I wanted to ask Gloria, the kind of stereotyping that you also see in the roles that women play, even in movies. I mean, there seems to be, I don't know if it's a backlash or kind of a throwback to this kind of romantic, he will come and save me, and he's not into you, but so I think it's a mix. I know we've come a long way, baby, but I sometimes wonder if this is where we thought we would.
No, I don't think so. But we have to look at who's controlling it.
Yes.
Even the Women's Media Center, for instance, which I'm part of, does all these surveys, and it turns out that less than 5% of the decision-making positions in the media related to the news, for instance, are occupied by women, and there is a backlash element too.
Yeah.
You think you're so smart, we'll show you.
Right.
You're just guess what?
Yeah.
And the ages are different.
Haven't succeeded more in taking on some of that power.
Well, it just doesn't. It isn't that they haven't tried.
Right.
It's that who makes the decisions.
Yeah.
For instance, at the Women's Media Center, we had a meeting of all the people who book for the big talk shows, and they were all women. And every one of them had to pitch to a guy who was the producer. Not that, guys aren't, good, some of them too. But the point was that they were not the decision makers still. And I talked to a lot of groups of women over time, and I would say women in the media are more depressed than any other group.
else.
Yeah. Because they're in the middle. They see the stories they want to cover versus what actually is getting covered, and they see that just as they get experience, they may be dispensed with because the age differential of who's on camera, men and women, is still pretty big.
I was interested also, you had a piece in this past Sunday's, I think it's the style section that I usually just throw away. I shouldn't admit that, but I do. And somebody called and said that you had an article in it, and I thought this is to the point of the media highlights some of these really weird women who are in politics and completely omits the women who make a difference. And I just thought
that was the point. That was the point of the piece. And it was interesting that was the woman editor of that magazine, was well aware of that and asked me to write this, which I was happy to do, showing that the ultra-right-wing women are elected by more men than women, and the centrist, people standing for equality, Barbara Boxer, Barbara Lee people, are elected by the gender gap, more women than men. So but who gets the press are the Sarah Palins of the world who are not representing the majority issues of women.
Right.
But the fact that it was in the style section.
Somebody's going to read it who needs to read it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was
style,
on the one hand it was odd, on the other hand it was subversive.
No, yeah, absolutely. It was subversive. I thought that was great. I almost missed it.
That's true. And speaking of fashion and style, we still have, unfortunately, this preoccupation with how we look. And another conversation that's brought up in my classes a lot is cosmetic surgery. And I have beautiful women in my classes who have had breast augmentation done, and they're extraordinarily proud of it and said, hey, you know what? It's because of Gloria Steinem and folks like her that I'm able to do what I want to do to make myself feel good. And then I have other people in the class, men and women, who say, but why did you feel the need to do that to make yourself feel good? You should just feel good as you are. Could you comment on that and why we're still looking for this perfect image that really isn't realistic, and why there's still that
I
striving?
mean, obviously, females are still more valued by our outsides than by our insides. What's important is our heads and hearts and so on. But what I'm most concerned with, actually, is that the people who make these decisions, I'm not here to judge individual people, but that they have the information they need. Because their breast augmentation happens to have a 30% complication rate. I mean, this is huge. Does anybody tell them that? There's no economic motive in telling them that. So, our first job, I think, is to get the information out there, and the women's health movement is trying to do that.
And everything seems so quick and easy now. Oh, a little Botox here, a little.
But it's like painting part of a room. Once you start,
I'm not there yet, but yeah, I think I'm getting there. Some spackling needs to be done.
No, and actually a lot of men also have plastic surgery because, although it's still at least twice as many women. But I don't know, does this come up? I'm much more, I'm past it, so I think it's much more important what Suze feels about it.
I don't think it's bad for somebody to have plastic surgery necessarily, but I wouldn't recommend it exactly. If that makes sense, like if it's for if there were an accident or something like that, then
well, but that's
definitely,
different, though.
but not just randomly.
Right. I have a very dear friend who nursed 3 children, and she had gone from a B down to an A, and she really felt horrible. I mean, she was depressed. She really felt horrible about herself and had her breasts made, I think, to a C or D, and she's back to herself again. So, although while I'm not thrilled with plastic surgery, it did make her feel better, and not for her husband, or she just missed the way she should look.
So it was a self-empowerment.
It was for her. It really was.
For me, it's a lot about the aging process, and I think I'm the only one among many of my friends who still has their hair in the color, whatever this is. I don't know quite what it is, but this is where it is.
Yeah, I have to confess, this is not my...
But I have no problem. I have no problem with people who choose to dye their hair or not to dye their hair. Or I thought about whether I should put on lipstick for the first time in 30 years for today. For today, I thought, what a vain thing to think about.
And I don't wear lipstick.
Yeah. But it's totally up to the person.
It is, but I think we have to recognize the forces, that are getting us to do this.
Right.
But I'll tell you, my rock bottom personal reason for never, I don't think, having, the facelift or something, is that I really think that once people have done it, you have to keep doing it, and somebody who's talking to you can't think about anything else. It's like talking to a guy with a bad toupee.
and your emotions don't show. I think one of the things that's so sad when you look at all these women who are on television now, you can't really see what they're thinking. They can't really smile.
And many of them, as they will tell you, did it to keep their job.
Right.
So
Sure.
I think we need to be much more concerned with the societal economic forces, with the lack of medical information, with that force women and some men to do it, than with blaming the individual who's mostly, we're responsible for our acts, but still is mostly responding to these forces.
And we just have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to see, speaking of societal forces, there's been a lot of changes in Congress lately, and especially with reproductive rights. Sure, the changes, it seems that we're going backwards in time rather than forwards when it comes to a woman's conversation with her doctor about what choices she needs to make. Are you frustrated with what has happened in the past 6 months, year?
But it depends who votes. The huge majority of people in this country believe that the decision whether to have children or not, to have as well as not to have, has to be left up to the individual and the physician, but not the government. Not the government. But unfortunately, because too few of the majority voted, we've got folks who are completely the opposite, who think reproduction is something that should be politically controlled, and sexuality in general. So, we're fighting tooth and nail, but I hope we understand, that this is all about our getting out there to vote, even though there are all kinds of there are other forces at work. But the voting booth is the one place where everybody is equal.
And are there any other projects that you have going on right now that you want us to kind of rally our students to support you with what you're doing? Besides reproductive rights? We have about a minute.
Well, I think the more we do the connections, the better off we are. So I hope we have more courses that connect child-rearing methods and family forms to governmental forms and governance and conflict and so on. Because one of the big punishments of gender is that the public world and war and violence in the streets is a masculine subject, and raising kids and family forms is so
Right.
we don't see that this causes that. So it's one of the big ways, I think, that gender punishes everybody, because we don't see the root causes.
That's true. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. And Irma and Suze, thank you for representing a few different generations
Thank
here.
you, and thank you for starting Women's Studies
She
here.
sure
I'm so
did.
grateful to you.
Yes.
And thank you for continuing.
All right. Well, this has been a special production.
And you for continuing.
This has been a special production of the Brookdale Network. I'm Meg Natter with the Women's and Gender Studies program here at Brookdale. See you in the classroom.